and regulated.
Behind razor wire?
It has to be fenced with security cameras. It didn't get into the details of
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Have you got minutes for us tonight? Okay. Don't have that heavy an agenda for tonight. I just want to say Greg O'Sullivan is out of town this week, so he's not going to, will not be in attendance at this meeting. Start with public concerns. Did anybody have anything they wish to bring up before we get going? Or yes, sir.
James Engel from Pos Hill Road. I had some, I guess, questions and concerns about the meeting from 2 weeks ago when our property was discussed. There was some confusion, I guess, and I think part of that was DCR's fault. That's a conservation restriction we're looking to put on that piece. It isn't a piece that's going to be sold to them. In other words, we're retaining ownership. And also that we're in Chapter 61, so it would not affect the tax base. That was a couple of the concerns that apparently were voiced.
Yeah, you want me to?
Go ahead.
Yeah. My understanding was they were going to be selling the property, and it was under Chapter 61. It would affect the tax base and that it would be coming off the tax roll. Now, I think one of the board members had some questions about that, and we have an amount of time to review that. I think it's up to 120 days, which I don't believe will be probably exercising that full amount by any stretch.
Right,
but
and that's what I was hoping for, because it is sort of a time-sensitive the money.
Right, we understand that.
But we aren't selling the property.
Excuse me?
We're not selling
Oh,
the
you were
property.
not, okay.
Correct. It's just a conservation restriction being put on. We're retaining
Okay,
ownership.
but I was of the impression it was being just,
Right, and that's right. I think, I'm not sure where that confusion came in, but I just wanted to straighten that out.
Okay.
We're not selling it. We are retaining ownership and having a conservation restriction put on it. And because it is in 61, the taxes won't change.
oh,
at
okay,
all.
yeah, that's
So
what,
61 and conservational intertax in the same manner?
Yeah,
Okay, and that was something I wasn't aware of.
right. So I just wanted to clear that up in hopes that we could get that going, because the money
Okay.
that has been allocated is, time sensitive.
okay, I think we can,
And I think we can probably, if you need some other confirmation, we have, people you could talk to,
okay.
from DCR.
Okay, now we need to, what is it, waive that?
Grant the the waiver of the 120-day waiting period.
Okay,
What does change with that land?
It just can never be built on. In other words, basically, when it's in 61, we could in turn sell it, pay the back taxes, but once the conservation restriction on it, then it's on it for life. For everybody's life. But the tax base stays the same.
I guess the only question I have, which I don't have the information, is what's the percentage of the land in Barry that's already under that restriction? That pretty much means it's set for life, that you can't touch it. I'm not knocking it, but we gotta look at, like, long term, in 40 years, where's this town gonna be and how much have we locked up that we can't do something with? And I'm just curious. It may have no bearing on a decision, I just don't know the numbers.
I think probably doesn't have much bearing on it, because I think they, as the property owners, they want to work with the state on this, they can do that. We're merely part of the notification process. And we have a certain number of days, 120 days, to review and pass judgment
Right,
to the
I
state.
got
But
you.
in the end, it's their call as to whether it gets sold, the
Yeah.
development rights get sold on it or not, and that's the right of the property owner.
Okay. I would let it.
Okay, so do we want to waive that?
just trying to think it through, because I know we discussed last week, and I just want to remember, I was one of the ones that was kind of supporting not waiving it, partly because the 120 days is there for a reason, and it can't just be because people can talk and you guys still can ignore everybody. I didn't know what the resources and whether our butters have a greater voice than we would, and I didn't want to just cut in and take that out because we have the right to cut out their voice.
And the abutters have all been notified as well.
Right, so that, right, but once they get notified, they have 120 days until we say, yeah, go ahead and waive it. So they may, I wanted to make sure that, to me, I'm not a big fan of waiving a period that is built into the regulation. Because as strong, as much as we would like, the greater portion of this population isn't always watching this meeting or knowing what's going on and gets, so without us literally mailing everything ourselves after that to say, hey, do you mind if we waive this, it's, so that was more my concern, is just not limiting the window of opportunity someone might have to speak up if they had a concern. And so that's really the only thing I was standing on, because I don't have, like he said, we don't even have really a say in what goes on other than that window of opportunity. I know this isn't something new to the town either, so, and I do support conservation. So it's been a couple weeks. What's your thoughts, Charlie?
I favor doing the waiver on it. I happen to be a very strong advocate of protection of land through deed restriction, because at times the public, they have a lot of land, but at times they're not the best land managers in the world, and the better land management is done with people still having an interest in the property. And I favor that type of thing, with the type of program with restrictions on it. And it also, in the end, gives the town a little bit of say in what goes on there, as well as when, if there's a proposed change of some sort, or allowing something on it. But it does keep it on the tax roll. We do receive a payment in lieu of taxes from the agencies, so that would probably offset that at some point. It's usually a year or so behind, but I happen to like to see the programs that have the covenants on the land. It still allows for a lot clearer as to where it's going, and I favor protection of the land. I'm one that advocates for that. We have a lot of land, and so I favor it, and I don't think we have a reason to stop it, and they're the property owners, and if they want to do this, they can anyway. It goes with the right to own land. If you want to sell it, you can sell it. Or whoever, and if that happens to be the state, then so be it.
I'll make a motion to waive the 120 day based on recent information.
Okay, I will second that. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. In favor?
Aye.
Okay, I think we're all set at this point. You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having it protected. Did anybody else have anything they wish to bring up to the board tonight? Good point. Okay. Sam?
I didn't know we were gonna do this now, we were gonna do this later. I'm gonna wait until the selectmen is finished. I don't know if we're gonna do this before or later, in regards to some of the issues that I had spoken to you about, Charlie. And you said that you would speak to this person about it. I didn't hear anything, and I had further discussions with my spouse, the person who wrote this police report. And I'm giving a copy for all three selectmen. And also for the town administrators. I'm having a problem, and my family is beginning to have another problem with one of the employees of this town, an elected official by the name of Dennis Fleming. And he has, almost a year ago, he sent police presence to this meeting, and it's all recorded on CDs or wherever it's recorded. And he had the police people attack me. The police know all about it. I had thought this were resolved. However, most recently, my spouse came down to the bottom of the driveway to pick some greens, and she waved to Dennis, and he yelled out, "Son of a bitch!" And he got out, went into his car, and everything's in the report, it's all a public record. And I think that this board should think about the ethics of the people who represent the town. Dennis Fleming is on several committees. He chairs one of the committees. On all of the committees he's been at, he's attacked me one way or another. He's refused to recognize me. He asked other people to recognize me. I have pretty broad shoulders, and I can deal with some of this BS, but when he goes and attacks my spouse, and no apology, if someone were to attack the person's mate, and they did it wrongly, they might say, "Gee, I'm sorry, but I didn't mean it for you, it was something bothering me, so please excuse me." But nothing happened, and she felt so concerned about it, she went and filed the police report, and it's all available for the public to read. I just think that this board, who knows all about this previously, and who at one time agreed to have an executive session, come up with a plan to figure out what, and I'd like to quote Deputy Chief Saborin's words, what kind of a bee does Dennis Fleming have in his bonnet towards me? Now, I heard these words from Deputy Chief Saborin. You can ask him. Those aren't my words. I don't use bee in someone's bonnet. That's just not my terminology. So we need to get to the bottom of this because the town is being damaged by this unethical behavior. And I thought big boys could get over these little problems. However, when it comes to attacking my family, without an apology, something needs to be done. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Do you have anything you wanna?
Not in the public comment section. I don't wanna just come out of nowhere with discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Let me take that back.
Yeah.
I got one thing. This wasn't brought up as an agenda item. It wasn't brought up to allow anybody else to have an opportunity to know what was coming or to speak to their defense. I don't appreciate the manner you brought it up. I'm not disregarding what you're stating, but by not putting it on an agenda item and allowing this board to bring in all parties to speak on their behalf, you're using the system to voice your opinion to the public and not allowing the one you're complaining about to have the opportunity to come prepared to answer for it. And I don't agree with that, and that's just my personal opinion. That's all I have to say.
May I respond or may I not respond?
Go ahead.
It's up to him.
Well, the only reason I brought this up is because I brought you up before individually numerous times for almost a year, and I have documentation, and everybody seems to forget it for one reason or another. I think coming to a selectmen's meeting when the chairman says, is there anything that someone has to say, I guess he's asking for some opinions. Now, I don't want to point the finger at Charlie, or you, Matt, or you, Greg, who's not there, but I don't want to point a finger at him either. But I have mentioned this to you numerous times on the phone. And Charlie gave me an opportunity to speak. If Charlie, as a chairman of this board, made a determination that only certain things could be said, that I guess he could have said, well, I don't want you to talk about this or this or this or this. But he didn't do that, he made it open. So that's what I took the opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, did anybody else have anything they? Okay. Now we'll move into old business, and there'll be opportunities later in the meeting as we go down through the business. Just to let everyone know, we did get a meeting arranged with Stetson School to talk about various issues that have been going on with Stetson School and some of the money issues. I think Senator Goby's going to be at the meeting. I guess Representative Berthium can't make it. But we're going to meet Wednesday evening up there, and it will be the board meeting with them to talk over some of these issues. And as per our discussion 2 weeks ago, we talked about just leaving this on. I didn't know if we wanted to have any talk about getting ready for that meeting, what we were hoping to get out of it now that we finally got one. It is an open meeting, it's posted, so I think one of the things that I had thought of, Matt, was maybe, and if Senator Goby is there, I think it's incumbent upon the state to take care of some of the problems and some of the financial problems that they've caused to the town. They're the ones that are arbitrarily placing students in our school system and up there, and it's clearly costing us money, probably more money through the schools than it's public safety wise, but it's causing them some difficulties for us. And I think one of the things that we need to do, impress upon them, is we're just a little town here. They're a very large organization. We need their help in soliciting money from the state, along with the other cities and towns, to get paid back for this. It was really a difficult thing at the town meeting last year, meeting that school budget, and the school made some moves for us, but the enrollment drops and we're adding children at the same time. There's only one way our assessment's going to go, and that's up. It had nothing to do with the way the school districts run. It just a numbers thing. So I was hoping to impress upon them that we need their help. They're a powerful group, Seven Hills is, and maybe they could help us out here. They've got a lot of contacts and to work with the various agencies. And one thing I wanted to impress upon them is that we all pay income tax to run these various state agencies. They start shifting things back onto the town. They're taking things that should be paid through the income tax and putting it right on the property tax. The burden of property taxpayers, and I think we need to press this home, and as well as talk to them about the public safety issues, that we need to start to see some sort of change in the protocol that they've established for talking to us. But that's what I'm hoping to, and I'm sure we're not going to get this resolved in one night. I expect it to be a long process, but they need to be aware that this is starting to add up to quite a bit of money between the schools and the town general government.
I think there's two main items that I think we need to address with Stetson. One is the funding, but I think more importantly, currently to the neighborhood, is the perimeter security. Funding is going to take time anyway. We both know that. It's a nice thing to say, let's partner up and see if we can do something, and then actually make a plan and start doing it but we need them to do something immediately about addressing their perimeter security and protecting the neighbors and the abutters to their property, because right now, I think that's the biggest concern I have is the fear that some of these neighbors have right now, knowing that someone could get out and nobody's gonna know for 2 hours, yet it only takes 10 minutes to walk to that house. What's happening in an hour and 15 minutes while they wait to find out where this child went? To me, that's completely unacceptable. So it's the safety first, the money second in my mind when it comes to my priority. So, but I do think they both need to be addressed. So I definitely think I agree with you on the funding and the burden that gets handed down to the town because the state throws kids there that now come to the local school, but we don't necessarily get the taxes because they're a nonprofit. So all of a sudden, it doesn't quite work. My understanding is if they're here for long term, the state starts creating some funding mechanism for the school through the school system. Somehow they pay a portion, not necessarily what I guess we would get. I think, what do they pay, like as if they're an out of town member of our school district, they would get the $5,000 a student or whatever, yet it might take us $45,000 to $100,000 to teach the child. So funding is a major issue, but security is the one I want to see them stand up and say, here's our plan and we're going to take care of this and you should see results in the next 2 months, not, yeah, that's something we'll think about and we'll get to it. So.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think when they had some of the neighbors are definitely concerned, and I think the night they had the helicopter and the whole bit there, it was a little out of control there.
Yeah. And
not a little, it was a lot, but, and we're getting so many calls. I think we can charge for calls over a certain amount. We charge for people who have alarm systems that are, don't work after a certain number of calls, and I think that it kind of drops into that category. I probably won't agree with that, but I think the public safety one is got to be the 2 hours after somebody takes off on them is just too long. I don't know. I saw in the paper they had a comment about it was a guideline from the state. Well, I don't know what the guidelines are, but 2 hours is too long. You cover a lot of ground in 2 hours, especially somebody but I know that these nights where they're out searching buildings, I mean, it's a pretty imposing thing to have dark and everything, and people out in the backyard searching buildings on your property and everything. So, but those were the two I wanted to address.
Yeah.
The public safety one. I don't want to see anything bad happen to anybody.
No, and I mean, I've even heard reports that sometimes the neighbors get afraid because they hear someone out back and they find out the people out back are the faculty of Stetson looking for the kid. So they don't know who's in their backyard, and all of a sudden somebody that didn't even say, hey, can I check your yard? They're just in there looking. And so they need to realize the minute they cross their boundary, they should have already called the police. They shouldn't be crossing the boundary and looking in the neighborhood until the police are directing how that approach works. And I think they really need to understand that we appreciate them, I guess, trying to go look for the kid. We totally don't appreciate that they're trying to keep it on the down low as they do it. And in doing so, they're risking the safety of our town. And I don't know about you, but I know that a lot of times you end up on somebody's property and you're trespassing. It doesn't matter what you think you're doing for a good intention. There's too much going on where somebody could respond in a very negative way and just accidents could happen at that point. It's just not worth it.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we're all set for the meeting. Do you have anything you wish to add? Claire? And then Sam?
Is the meeting Wednesday night here?
No, it's actually at Stetson.
Because I thought it was posted for here, or did I read it wrong?
It's posted for Stetson.
But it's an
in
open
their
meeting.
room.
Yeah. Now where in Stetson?
I guess it's in the administration,
Administrative building.
administrative building, and
Which is,
If you go in, it's on the right.
The newer building.
The
on
newer
right.
building, it kind of runs perpendicular to the road.
okay.
okay, Sam?
I had some conversation with the chief, not because I know some inner movings or any discussions, just we just happened to be speaking, and I made a suggestion that the town keep track of how many times the police department is asked to go over there. I'm assuming that the police or the representative from the police department will be at the meeting tomorrow night. Because I've heard stories from other people in town, and I'd like, the same as my feeling, is that when they, I'd like to be clear, I'm not disrespecting the people who are going to the school. We all have difficulties in lives, and this happens to be a place, but I don't think Barry signed up in any way, shape, or form to house a prison, to be as blunt as I could. And we're talking about helicopters, and I didn't hear the helicopter, but being a helicopter pilot, I know what kind of noise it is. And unless you've had a helicopter fly over your head, you have no idea. And I don't know what we can do, but I think it's destroying our tax base, and I think it's destroying the interest that people have for coming to this town. And I don't know the story, but there's a house across the street from theirs, whether they gave it up at all, or whether they gave it up for a reason. I don't know why it's empty, but it happens to be directly opposite that school, and maybe it was because of the difficulty of the school, and maybe it was not. But we have a lot of property that needs to be sold in this town, and people are moving out of this town, and we wonder why, I wonder why these people are having difficulty coming to this town, and maybe Stetson School is one of the reasons. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Alrighty. You're all set with that? Okay.
Also,
Okay, the holiday meeting schedule. You know,
it's,
traditionally, there are no meetings usually between the week of Christmas week and New Year's. And we're not scheduled for one, but usually there aren't any other meetings neither. It's kind of an off week, and I guess our first meeting could be January 2nd, which would make up for the Monday night that we're gonna be shut down on. January 1st is a Monday also. But I don't know how you wanna proceed on that. If we want a Tuesday meeting,
I mean, unless town business requires us, like, it wouldn't be a good idea to wait 2 weeks. I don't mind skipping that meeting. But if we got too much going on and they need then I'll accept a Tuesday meeting, or just to keep regular business
Okay.
moving.
okay.
the third Monday after that is Martin Luther King Day too, so that would be a Tuesday meeting.
See, no meetings in January.
DPW meeting's on the 8th, so.
Well, we'll meet you wanna meet the Tuesday of Martin Luther King week?
You guys do have a meeting with finance on the 10th, so if there was anything between now and then that needed immediate attention, we could schedule a little bit
Okay.
earlier than finance, if needed. Andrew and I
Put that
kinda
on
went
my
over stuff
calendar.
today, we didn't see anything as of right now.
Pretty much it's all budget right now in the office, so that's pretty much everything that we'll be focused on until then anyway.
Okay.
Outside the liquor license renewals that are on tonight's agenda, do we have other
You will.
certificates that are gonna have to come through in a timely
You will,
manner
and I was-
before then?
I was gonna have you do it at that meeting on the 10th.
Okay, we can do that, I think, huh? If we need a meeting prior to that, we'll call a special.
Yeah, and then we do have the DPW commission meeting on the 8th, so if we had to take care of an item or two, we could start early on that night, maybe.
Yeah. We have a lot of stuff. Okay, we can do that, so they,
I mean, yeah, probably should schedule the, that's last year's. The Tuesday after Martin Luther King Jr. Day probably should be
our first meeting.
our first full meeting.
So this, 16th.
I'm hoping. Is that it? Is it, okay.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, we have a special event request on winter enlightenment.
Yeah, and I think this actually stemmed from the previous conversation that you had talked with Margot Miller about getting the special event permit for their, it was the light up the common, or they wanted to put luminaries on the common.
Right.
Yeah, this is the follow-up special event permit that you had
The
requested.
permit with the use of town.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay, they're looking to use the, from the Insight Meditation Society, and this is scheduled for Saturday, February 1st, 2018.
Make a motion to accept.
Okay. I will,
The special town.
I will second. Discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote in favor.
Aye. Just turn around.
Done that back. What?
I gotta step out real quick.
Oh, okay. We'll hold them.
Sorry. Didn't have you back.
Did everybody sign in on here, actually? I have some. Three of us.
guess we're ready to move into new business on outdoor cannabis cultivation. I believe somebody is, come right up and,
Any seat in particular, or front row center?
whatever hot seat you want, I guess.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Charlie J.
James McMahon.
Matter.
Pleasure to meet you.
Hi, nice to see you again.
Good to see you. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay, you're more than welcome.
So as the agenda said, I'm here tonight to speak a little bit about outdoor cannabis cultivation. I'd come in, I believe it was about 2 weeks ago, popped in the last 10 minutes of the workday, and Mr. Golis was gracious enough to receive me and have a quick conversation. And as we got to talking a little bit about it, he said, this is absolutely something we need to bring to the select board, and before we discuss this any further, you know, have them voice their opinion on it and make sure that it's discussed in public settings. So the story of why I'm here today. So the rationale behind this is the Cannabis Commission, which is the new body overseeing regulated cannabis in Massachusetts, has decided to open up a lot of new licensure categories that never existed under the medical program. It's a pretty innovative system, and it's going to be managed under a lot of the principles that have made the medical program so successful and have made it into the incident-free program that it's been. It's been 5 years now, and there have been no diversion incidents, there's been no theft incidents, employee loss, anything along those terms. So what they're trying to do is take a proven model and expand it and make it a little bit more accessible so the industry doesn't coalesce into a few major players. And one of their most interesting ideas about that is allowing for outdoor cannabis cultivation. Up until now, everything's had to be done inside of a pharmaceutical grade facility, overpressured with air. You know, you put on the full ET style bunny suit when you go in, and it's a very, very high input and high cost system. And what they're trying to say is, out in California, out in Oregon, out in Colorado, there are people who grow organic, safe, regulated cannabis, and their average return is about $1 million an acre on that plot of land. So for smaller communities that are agriculturally focused, this could be, you know, a productive match, and say, let's work with our agricultural heritage, let's work where we can keep a close eye on the people who are going to be in this industry and make sure that it's going to be well supervised and well regulated. And let's do it in a fashion that preserves public safety, that preserves the public health, that preserves the character of the town, preserves the character of the community, and still maintain a 3% revenue share off that $1 million an acre, still have a host community agreement that addresses some of the more intangible concerns, shall we say, some of those more kind of quality of life concerns, and do it in a responsible, regulated way. So what I've been doing for the past month or so is going to different communities in the area, especially in northern Worcester County, where there's a heavy agricultural focus, and saying, I've been working with CMRPC on this, I've been working with MDAR, and basically trying to cast as large a tent as possible, get as many voices as possible to the table, and say, this is coming down the pipeline, and it's coming down the pipeline very shortly. They are going to release the draft regulations on how this all will run tomorrow, and I'm sorry, on Thursday. And those will go out for a public comment period in January. And then the applications are going to start being released in April. And I know Barry has a moratorium, but it's still going to be coming down the pipeline. There's still going to be some interest in this. So the reason I'm here tonight, a group I'm involved with, the Massachusetts Cannabis Business Association, is coming up with some draft policies, some model zoning, some model ordinances, model practice on this. That's all well and good, but it's all for naught if there's no feedback from the communities, and there's no feedback from the municipalities that say, you know, this is what we think of the zoning, this is what some of our concerns are, these are some of our hopes for how the program would run, these are some of our issues with how the program is run, and try to figure out a way to meet in the middle. So what I'd like to do, and what I'm hoping we can do, is set up, you know, sort of an informal task force on this within the community, and say, let's work with some of the department heads, you know, let's work with planning, let's work with Board of Health, let's work with police, fire, and safety, and start coming up with sort of a round table where we can bounce ideas off each other, figure out what some of the zoning considerations for this should be, figure out how to address these concerns, and just sort of start coming up with a roadmap for this. there are a lot of communities in the area have basically said, you know, this is something that we are very interested in. We'd like to move on this in a, if not official, at least informal regional fashion. A lot of the farmers who are interested in this have property in multiple towns or have properties that straddle town boundaries, and they don't really want to start putting GPSs on their tractors. They'd much rather have a nice, you know, sort of regional push on this. So what I'd love to do, and if the town is receptive to it, and if you think it's a good idea, just start exploring this topic a little bit more and start saying, you know, what can we do to integrate this new industry and this new economic engine into the town of Barre in a way that's going to be safe, in a way that's going to be responsible, in a way that's going to be ecologically conscious, and in a way that's going to preserve quality of life in the community. You know, the last thing you want to do is come into a new town and have something change. The reason that you wanted to come to that town is you were attracted to it in the way it was. So figuring out options to do this in a safe fashion. The Cannabis Commission has come up with some pretty good common sense plans. You know, nothing can be visible from a public way. You're going to have it fully surrounded by perimeter fencing. There's going to have to be video cameras. There's going to be extensive testing protocols, background checks of whoever's involved in the business, no one on site under age 21. And something that makes this attractive to a lot of communities, there's no retail involved with outdoor cannabis cultivation. It's strictly cultivation. And then they'll be required, whether they're growing it either as part of a co-op or as part of just a LLC farm, to then wholesale that cannabis into the larger established dispensary system. So it's almost a chance to kind of have your cake and eat it too. You can have the benefits of participation in this economy without having to have some of the ripple effects of having retail cannabis sales within the community. It's kind of a nice happy medium. So it's something that's been quite popular in a lot of communities in the area. And I'm just hoping to kind of continue that path and continue this push forward on it. And what I'd love to do and what I'd love to have is, you know, not your blessing, but at least your non-objection to moving forward on this. And contacting officials within the municipal structure and starting to work towards this informal roundtable discussion and basically say, we have a zoning code that we can put down on the table. Let's start customizing it for Barre. Let's start picking and choosing what we like and what we don't like. And, you know, take a lot of that lift off of the shoulders of the planning department and see what we can do and say, you know, this has been very successful in Oregon, this has been very successful in Colorado. Let's figure out how to adapt it for the unique considerations here.
Okay. Yeah, we're on a moratorium, as it's stated, and it was mainly because when we put it in, I don't believe the legislature had actually enacted the law at that point. And so, you know, we didn't want to start into permitting something that we really couldn't do, and we're still on the moratorium because they haven't actually promulgated all the regs yet at that point. We have something that's pending with, for a property in town on the medicinal marijuana, as I'm sure you're aware.
I did see that, the greenhouse facility, right up in the industrial park.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm not adverse to handling it the way you suggested. This board in particular has very little to say about the permitting, as far as I know. But we certainly could appoint the committee that would be running the thing. And we're coming up with some guidelines for the planning board and Board of Health or whoever. And I'm certainly not adverse to doing that. And I figured at some point we're probably going to have to do that anyway. So I don't know about the $1 million an acre, but I suspect as more acres come in, that figure's going to start.
So that assumes right now for a pound of outdoor cannabis grown, processed, trimmed at the organic end of the market out in California, that retails right now for about $800 a pound. And that $1 million an acre figure is taking into account the shorter growing season in Massachusetts, which doesn't give you the same enormous, there's a reason we get all of our tomatoes from California, not Mass.
I understand.
So that figure I gave out of the $1 million an acre takes into effect a $400 a pound range and growing about 1 pound per plant, which again is on the more conservative side of the estimate. So it's a big number, but the way I look at that, that's not a reach, that's more of a benchmark, and that should be a target goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
MDAR is very excited about this because they're looking not only at cannabis cultivation, but also hemp cultivation as sort of a farm within a farm. And saying for a lot of these farms that might be right on the borderline of profitability and might be struggling season to season to make their numbers, this is a fantastic way to supplement that income and allow another income stream on the same property, on the same farm, managed by the same people who know the cultivation that well and are familiar faces within the community. And they devote a patch to cannabis and can pay their mortgage and pay their bills off that. And then the remainder of the farm is there for them to follow their passion. And that fear of, you know, not knowing how you're going to pay your bills the next day can be alleviated a little bit because you have this second high in demand income stream that really allows you a lot of creativity with the rest of your operations.
You had submitted something that spoke to potential municipal tax.
Right, so there's a few avenues for the municipality to directly benefit off this. For the first thing, the restriction that these cannabis companies need to be nonprofits has been done away with. So property tax is and use tax, you know, those type of things are now back on the table. In addition to that, there's a 3% revenue sharing agreement that's signed with the town as part of that local excise tax. Essentially, it would be when the product is wholesaled and being sent out, you would, it's public information, how much is being sold, and the town would be issued a check, you know, and it's sort of a business decision with the town, and the host community agreement is that annual, quarterly, by the sale, you know, that sort of thing, but how it's distributed. But that 3% is locked in under state statute. There's also the host community agreement. And the host community agreement is a contract between the marijuana company and the community, usually negotiated in a combination in the other communities that we've organized these in. It's sort of a combination of the town administrator and the select board, sort of working as a team to negotiate these with the cannabis community. And it's a way to mitigate some of the more intangible, less, you know, can't quite put a dollar figure on it, concerns of the community. So, for instance, a firm that I've helped get organized down in Charlton, one of the issues that they were really concerned with was traffic flow. They just put in that Treehouse brewery down there, and Treehouse said they'd be getting about 300 cars a day. They're getting about 3,500 cars a day. So the traffic really, really needs a lot of amelioration. So what we did is say, you know, since we're going to be since my clients are going to be very close to them, what we're going to do is help with Worcester Department of Transit, or with you know, District 3 Department of Transit. We're going to try to get some additional signage in there as part of our project and say, you know, we'd like to have this additional signage. In addition, you know, we're going to work out a businessmen's coalition between a few of the downtown businesses to see if we can set up a business improvement district, work on getting some additional traffic lights, maybe hire a detail officer every once in a while on the weekends, and, you know, sort of use it as a vehicle to address some of those concerns. Some of the other things that we've done is use the host community agreement to say, you know, we'll provide youth anti-drug education efforts, we'll provide harm reduction, opiate use reduction efforts, and sort of provide these educational materials, these public informational materials, free of cost to the community, and say, you know, this can be something that can supplement the existing systems and supplement the additional information, and use it basically information that's coming from Mass State Police, from Department of Public Health, and just sort of say, you know, this can be a good benefit to the community to sort of mitigate any of those concerns.
One more question. How does cultivating cannabis fall under Chapter 61A?
So cultivating cannabis is outside of ag exemptions. It has been specifically excluded from any sort of agricultural zoning removal or agricultural zoning exemption. The question that is under a bit of definition right now, and it's looking like it's going to lean towards the more sort of conservative end of things, is, you know, does a farm that is already ag exempt fall back under zoning concerns if they start cultivating cannabis? It's looking like they might. But a cannabis farm, regardless of size, regardless of amount sold or anything under those concerns, will be able to be regulated by local zoning. So what a lot of towns have done, or at least we're proposing in some of this model zoning, is saying, you know, maybe we've set up a marijuana overlay district and say it's appropriate within these overlays, or, you know, it's appropriate within agricultural districts given certain conditions and things along those lines. So the municipalities do have a pretty good deal of control over this whole process. Not only can they look at it through zoning, the old system of needing those letters of non-objection from police and the selectmen is also being done away with. The new system is going to be having a public hearing 6 months before operation starts, and essentially gathering concerns from the community and then working with those same individuals, selectmen, police chief, and, you know, anyone else who wants to come to the table to set up an action plan to address some of those concerns, but not do it through the formal letter of non-objection process. So there's town oversight there, there's town oversight through the zoning, there's town oversight through police, ensuring that the security protocols are being followed, and typically in the zoning codes we promote, there's also oversight for the Board of Health and an Ag Commission, if the Ag Commission wants to take it on, to promulgate best practices and ensure that you know, waste management techniques are being followed, ensure that things are being stored in a safe fashion, and those sort of public health concerns are being followed as well.
The state issues all the business certificates, permits, whatever you call
So,
it.
so the state issues all the permits and does check-ins with the municipality throughout that process, essentially to say, you know, have they told you this? Have you guys gone over this part of it and that sort of thing? So it's becoming a looser process than it was under the medical system. Not loose in the sense of the standards are slipping, but looser in the sense that it's not as rigid of a ladder of applications. It's much more of a collaborative process between the state, the municipality, and the applicant. So the state will issue all the licenses, and then the municipality will figure out zoning concerns and negotiate the host community agreement based off of the results of that public hearing and their ongoing sort of, you know, process of citing this facility, or these facilities, I should say. And there's a pretty phenomenal deal of state oversight. It's a very, very intense scrutiny of the system. Everyone involved with it is background checked. The financial contributors to it are background checked. There's a pretty rigorous standard for passing that background check itself. There is an ongoing inspection operation. There's 12 full-time inspectors that will come throughout the life of this process to come and check it out. I can tell you from the medical side of things, there's one announced and one unannounced inspection per month at minimum. And on top of that, there is maybe a 30-page checklist of every little thing you have to have accomplished before they'll let you open your doors. Everything from, you know, you have enough money set up in an escrow account to cover winding down the operations in case everything goes belly up, all the way down to what I had to deal with last week. Doors must have a 12 by 12 sign that says no admittance under age 21 and no smaller than 1-inch black letters. So, you know, very, very comprehensive. We had to run down to Alpha Graphics and get a bunch of vinyl door signs printed up because our letters were 3/4 of an inch. So, you know, those type of things. So it's a very, very tightly managed process. It's a very, very tightly controlled process. And even with all of those, you know, oversights and all of those restraints, the only industry that's ever grown faster than this in the history of the United States is broadband internet. The cannabis industry is absolutely, absolutely exploding. The Boston Globe says the market will be worth about $1 billion in Massachusetts by 2020. And Bloomberg says the overall cannabis market in the United States is worth about $50 billion right now. So there's a significant amount of market share out there. And just to be quite frank, as we all are well aware of, given the arrest records that we've seen in the past, there's a functional illicit market for this substance out there. And this is a phenomenal way to separate the people who want to do it in the correct way, want to do it responsibly, and want to do it in a fashion that will contribute to their local town, and offer a vehicle to do that, and offer a process to gain greater control and gain greater oversight over an industry that, if they don't, is just going to exist and keep growing regardless of anything we do. So the best thing to do is come up with safe, responsible, common sense policies to allow for this industry to grow and flourish, and to do it in a way that benefits the community instead of sort of detracting from the community, shall we say.
Okay, you certainly give us something to think about here. I'm not adverse to putting together the groups are coming up with a task force or whatever you choose to call it to look into it now. I have one question, and mainly because I used to farm and everything. Do you have to own the property to raise it?
So you don't have to own the property to raise it, but you do have to have explicit permission from the landlord if you're leasing the property. So the property owner has to give a sign off to it, but there's no restriction to the ownership. On the medical side of things, you can own it, you can lease it, you can lease with an option, but what you have to demonstrate is that you have some form of control over the property. They're discussing right now, it most likely will come out that way. People can apply with property under option, because there are some people who will say, you know, if I get my license, I'll take those 10 acres, but if I don't, you know, all well and good type of thing. So that's another system that they've allowed as well, as long as you have a signed option on the property. And the systems that they've looked at for ownership over these are essentially, they're gonna allow 3 different forms of ownership, either an LLC, an LLP, or as an agricultural co-op, and model those after the dairy and maple co-ops that have been very successful here in the Commonwealth. Just as an aside, co-ops have been the most popular sort of in the farming community. It's what people are very familiar with, and it's a very attractive option to sort of defray a lot of the startup costs and distribute them back.
I had a question. It has nothing to do directly with Barry, but does this, maybe it hasn't even been thought of yet, but I didn't know if Department of Ag Resources had done any looking in. Does this fall under the limits of like Cap of Volstead and the ability to restrict supply and price? Do you know where I'm going with it?
So right now, they're still at a very, very early stage over at MDAR. I was just speaking with John LeBeau last week. He was
What's he?
yeah, he's commissioner of there. So they're still trying to come up with, and he's got a very strong agricultural background. For years and years, he was town administrator over in Princeton. So this is kind of his backyard, and that's why he's taken such a nice special focus to making sure that it comes into northern Worcester County in a sustainable and sort of, you know, smooth fashion. They're still trying to come up with what the best practices are going to be, and at least decide, you know, what are our standards going to be for waste management, what are our standards going to be for deforested zones around the cannabis plot, you know, what are our pesticide applications and things along those going to be. So I think that those concerns as regards towards sort of the regulatory structure over supply and demand are coming, but coming in maybe a phase 2 of regulations, and at least for right now, they've done it under a tiered growth system. And essentially, you can apply for different tiers of licenses that allow you to grow up to a certain square footage. And then there's no restriction on tiers, but you're at least classified within those groups, and then setting something up for exactly what you brought up, for sort of stratifying the market and figuring out a way that supply and demand can be a little bit more regulated in that traditional agricultural sense. The one thing that does come into play with some agricultural subsidies is that sort of interplay of federal law, and you're now growing a controlled substance, but you might be receiving federal agricultural subsidies for another crop or something along those lines. And what MDAR has been working on in that sense is essentially trying to set up the policies on their end. So if you're in compliance with their policies, you'll make sure that you're also in compliance with not falling foul of any triggering on the federal law side. There's a memorandum called the Cole Memorandum from the Department of Justice. It lays out sort of 19 red flags of what you can't do and where the Department of Justice will start getting involved. The Cannabis Commission has been setting up all of their regulations to fall well within inside the points raised in the Cole Memorandum, and MDAR is doing a lot of that same thing with their best practices and basically saying, you know, we realize that you might be getting a corn subsidy and you don't want to jeopardize your 50 acres of corn with your half acre of cannabis. Let's set up a policy that'll let those two exist in separate side-by-side streams, but, you know, not have any crossover between the two.
I wasn't even thinking, I was just thinking aloud maybe on restricting the supply to maintain the price.
Well, right now,
which they can do.
They absolutely can, but the issue is actually on the other side of the fence right now. The issue is they're trying desperately to figure out how they can increase the supply. In Nevada, in Maryland, and in Oregon, on the first day of sales in all three, they sold out of the entire state supply and completely not only emptied the shelves, but emptied the shelves of the warehouses as well. And as an agricultural product, there's some lead time with harvest and cure and dry and everything else. So that's another reason why the state is so interested in creating these broad license categories to try to increase that supply and get the market to a point where at least there's an equilibrium. Because right now, it is 99.9% on the demand side. And that's the biggest thing. And what's phenomenal from the Commonwealth's point of view is this all has to be kept within the Commonwealth. So nothing can cross state lines, nothing can be imported. So it's all, as agriculture is, it's intensely, intensely local. Some of the things we like to put into those zoning considerations, or at least bring up in a host community agreement, is usually provision to have a higher local first policy, and essentially say the jobs would have to be, that's typically as part of the host community agreement, typically, you know, say the jobs would have to be advertised within the local community for X amount of time before they can be advertised out of state and things along those lines. You know, having a certain percentage of employees be within the local community either by, you know, time the host community agreement is signed or by the time operations begin. So there's a lot of ways to keep this, you know, very tied into the community and keep this from being sort of an absentee farm situation. The state's taken a lot of goals to make sure that this is going to be managed by people. What they want to see is managed by people who are doing this on their own property, on their own farms, and still practicing agriculture, still doing what they've been doing for the past 50 years, but just doing it with a different crop.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Yep, Sam?
What's your first name?
James.
James.
Yes.
I was just wondering, other states have tried this, and there's been talk about a lot of profit, et cetera. What does your organization consider and the profit potential for the individual towns? Have you calculated per person? Have you calculated per square mile? Have you had a general calculation? I know that when we have a lottery, theoretically a certain amount of money goes back to the towns and the states. I don't have any idea of how much. I hear it's lots, but I'm not in.
So in this system, what happens is 3% goes to the community, and that's a state law, and that's part of the licensing procedure. So no matter how much you're producing, whether you're producing $1,000 a year or $100,000 a year, 3% of your gross sales go back to your local community as an excise tax for being able to operate within their borders. So if you go with the standard that's been promulgated in the past of if it's responsibly cultivated, given even a 50% price drop from California, that's sort of $1 million an acre. You know, you're looking at $30,000 an acre going back to the community for every acre that's under cultivation.
For every acre.
So it's
going back to the community.
Going back to the community.
To offset taxes, but of course, maybe some of these monies would be used for law enforcement principles, and maybe it's a wash.
No, so that's exactly the design of the system. It's essentially designed to say this facility is going to come into the community and there are going to have to be some more police patrols. And maybe the fire department is sending an inspector down once a month to make sure everything's being stored correctly. And, you know, that money doesn't come out of nowhere. So that 3% is what's designed to sort of defray and offset those costs. And how the town distributes it once they get that 3% is, you know, a very local question and sort of a case-by-case basis of how the community best thinks those funds can be distributed. But the vehicle for that and the ability to do so is provided. And it's essentially saying to the community, you know, we recognize that there are some burdens that have come on from this facility being located here. Here are some funds to help offset those burdens, and you as the community, you know, financial committee, select board, whoever it is, have the best knowledge of exactly where those funds can be distributed to have the greatest effect.
Has your organization calculated generally per person how much money the town of Barry theoretically would get if the town of Barry would be an average?
That's a very hard number to kind of say because each town will have a certain amount under cultivation that'll be different.
But
Each
how
town will
about
have a
out in
different
Colorado
fund.
or Nevada or other states that have done this? How much has actually gone back to the people,
Mhm.
not speaking about law enforcement or other
So,
issues?
so other states don't have this 3%, so again, I understand your question, and I understand where you're getting at with this, sort of what's the per capita benefit, but no other state has this revenue share. Massachusetts is the only state that does this revenue share. So you can't say in Denver, people get $5,000 each or anything like that there, because that number doesn't exist. So what you can then say is, the town gets, you can just sort of pick numbers out of a hat if you want to, and you can say, if the town's getting $30,000 an acre and they have 10 acres in total under cultivation, that's $300,000. Okay, well, there's 5,000 residents, so each resident, is per capita getting $6,000, and you can do those sort of back of the envelope calculations. But there's too many variables at play to say, this is a number that you can hang your hat on.
So it's a case-by-case situation.
Exactly, because if the town allows 1 acre, or not if the town allows, but I should say if a farmer does 1 acre, 10 acres, or 100 acres, those are gonna be 3 very, very different numbers, and it sort of depends on how that all falls out later on down the pipeline. But that 3% is absolutely a number that you can stick to, and basically, as a percentage, the more that's under cultivation, the more that's being produced, the higher that number is per capita. But it is up to the town at the end of the day to determine how best to distribute those funds. The state is determining now whether those would be held in sort of a marijuana trust account or whether those would be distributed into the general fund, and one of the two.
So how is your organization able to skirt the fact that it's still by federal law not licensed?
Under the same way that the state of Massachusetts skirts those regulations. So there's the Cole Memorandum, which essentially says, it came from the Department of Justice, so federal regulations, and it said, if your state's marijuana program is not doing any of these 19 things that we consider to be red flags, then you are not an enforcement priority, and we will essentially live and let live. So what the state does, why they're having those Cannabis Commission meetings, the way that we structure the zoning, and everything else about that, you stay within the guidelines that have been set down by the federal government, and you're in their good graces.
Okay, somebody else had a question, then Phil, okay? Claire?
Yeah, I've got a couple. What organization are you representing? You
Sure.
keep saying organization, but what?
Sure,
Where?
so it's the Massachusetts Cannabis Business Association, and it's essentially a chamber of commerce for cannabis businesses, is the best way to describe it.
Now, are you the only one in the state of Mass? Or are there other businesses like this?
Other cannabis businesses?
Yeah.
Associations.
Yeah, so right now, in the provisional licensure stage, which essentially means the cannabis business has been squared away with their local community and they've had all the local sign-offs and they're just waiting to finish their construction. There's 106 cannabis businesses within that category right now. There's 15 operating dispensaries within the state currently operating that have been operating since 2014. That number increases by about 1 per month. There are 40,000 active users in the medical program right now.
What I'm talking about is your organization, your level of it. How many of those is there in the state of Mass?
Oh, there's plenty of advocacy groups. There's plenty of people who are out here.
So you're an advocacy group.
Well, we're a businessmen's alliance, so, I mean,
But you're here to sell it to the town of Barry.
I'm here to sell zoning to the town of Barry and to say, I have businesses that would like to locate here. They need predictability in their zoning to know how best to operate their business. So let's work together to find some zoning that protects Barry and also allows these businesses to flourish. And there's a way to meet in the middle on that.
So what sent you to Barry?
The fact that I have clients who are interested in farming in Barry. I mean, I'm not trying to be disingenuous.
What is it gonna cost the town of Barry to have you give all this advice?
So I'm not looking to charge the town of Barry anything. I'm honestly, what I'm looking to do is take my clients who, I mean, let's be frank, the clients are the ones who have said, we'd like to know what the zoning would be in Barry, we'd like to operate a business in our community. So they have said, we'd like you to work with the town and come up with zoning concerns for the town. So I'm not looking to charge the town, this is 100% pro bono, 100% saying, you know, this is a nonprofit coalition of businessmen who have said, we want to know how we can start planning our businesses. We want to know what's going to happen 1, 3, 5 years down the pipeline. The only way we can do that is to have some sort of ground rules and have some sort of framework of the time, place, and manner that these businesses can operate in. So what they've said is, can you please go and speak with the town and start that discussion and start figuring out how you can then come back and tell us to operate our businesses. So I'm not looking to charge the town anything. I'm looking to help people who are interested in opening businesses in town figure out what the rules will be to open those businesses.
So it's like you're coming in the back door.
No, I don't know.
I came in through the front just like you.
No,
Not
but
the
you
great
know what
light.
I mean.
So this is
Trying
coming,
to sell it.
this is coming no matter what. The
Yep,
state's
okay.
voters have already sold this with a 60% vote. So whether or not the town chooses to act on this, this is happening in July. And the town can either be prepared for that and have zoning codes that will allow them to respond to the situation, or they can try to address it in an ad hoc fashion as it happens. I think it's best to be prepared. I think it's best to know what the situation is, and I think it's best to have a framework to go into those discussions with, instead of having someone come in July and knock on the door of the planning board and say, the state has now told me I can operate a marijuana farm, what should I do? And have the planning board have to start the discussion then.
Believe me, we're already working on it.
Okay. Phil, you had a comment?
Just a suggestion, we already have an agricultural commission. It seems like I would like to see them proactive on this, and then they would get more input from the farms and the landowners. And it's already in existence and should be aware of all this, to make recommendations to the planning board, to the selectmen.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a perfect match, because that's the experts. And you want to have the people who are going to be the closest to it and have the most knowledge address it in a fashion where they can say, you know, I've been here for 30 years, I know the agricultural considerations, and you can't just sit in Boston and say this is the best way to do it. You have to know the town and know the properties themselves. And they're going to have some unique geographical issues, some unique concerns there. So to have those people who are those local experts is, I think, exactly the best people to work on this.
Okay. Who had a question? Okay, Beck.
Yeah, I have a question about the regulations regarding if all of the regulations are not certified in time, there's already a question of that the licensures that are already in place for medicinal will automatically become recreational licensures. Is that also true for cultivation sites?
So it's going to be actually kind of a within the same framework but different system. So the automatic rollover, first off, let me start all of this off by saying, I've been to every cannabis commission meeting they've had since September. It's been 4 days a week. I can say in full faith and credit, they're going to have this done by July. The pace they're working at, the process they've been working at, the way that they've been working together, this is going to be done by July. I would, not a gambling man, but I bet on it. So part of that process is absolutely a transition from the medical sphere to the recreational sphere. The way the medical sphere is set up right now is a vertical integration system. So you both cultivate it, you process it, and you retail it all within one company. The recreational side of things is going to be a distributed system. So you can either cultivate or manufacture or retail or any combination of the three, but it's 3 separate licenses. So the medical side of things, who have that sort of 1, 2, 3 in one license, will be able to convert those. There's an application process to go through to do that conversion. The state comes out and makes sure that everything is what you said it was and makes sure that you have the proper plan in place to convert it. Right now, that's only 15 places. What the state is more looking at with this system are going to be those new applicants who are looking to apply as adult use cultivators only and sort of say, how can we address those concerns? So there's no automatic flip, there's no calendar date flip or anything like that. You still have to apply into the system, but and under the medical system, everything's had to be cultivated indoors. So the only outdoor cultivation places you're gonna see are gonna be new applicants.
So when you talk about the switch being of a completely different licensure, that would be like what you did in North Brookfield when you came into the select board, telling them that you were gonna do a fully medicinal grow, and then after the regulations changed?
Well, we were always very clear in North Brookfield. What we always said from the beginning is that we were applying for a medical program, and when the laws came out for recreational, we would address it then. And the town was always on board with that. I was actually in there today talking to the police chief before I came in. We've kept him abreast of the entire situation, and the town select board and the police chief are both fine with the conversion happening. Now, nothing's happened yet because the full application hasn't come out yet, but absolutely from the beginning, we said we are applying as a medical license because that's the only thing we can do right now. And when the laws come out, and if it makes sense to convert, we'll look at converting. And that's been from day one, and that's on video.
Okay. Matt?
The one take from what he presented and what I understand is the general concern that we've heard since the medical came before our board a year and a half ago, I don't know how long ago, is the timeline is we gotta have bylaws prepared to be ready for the annual town meeting for our zoning concerns and questions. So if you have concerns about a medical facility turning recreational due to state permitting that allows them to do things that they didn't do as a medical facility, then you gotta put it in your bylaws on what you're gonna allow. And so generally it just comes down to, if we don't do this, someone's gonna do it for you and you're gonna have nothing to stand on because you put no laws in place. So I do know the planning board has been working on certain structure. I do think that they should use some advice from the Agricultural Commission, maybe some from the Board of Health, because they're all gonna have a little role in this somewhere along the way. And their experience, advice, input should help us create a better framework of laws. Me saying that is about all I can say on that, because I can't make one committee talk to another and work together. I just think you need to understand, for the betterment of the town, you need to be open and listen to each other and work together towards a common good on this, because this is gonna get tricky if you don't really pay attention and dot your I's and cross your T's before you present a bylaw in front of the town. Because every law has a loophole. And if you don't really think it through, you should use each member's experience and understanding, yeah, we thought this bylaw would work and this is what happened to us 10 years later. It'd be worth it. That's all I can suggest. I don't know if we need to create a special committee to work with this. Of course, I have no problem with you going to each committee and putting yourself on the agenda or asking to be and being involved. I personally think that due to the certain times we're in, we shouldn't try to stop this, but we should, it's kind of like, you know, can you stop a flowing river, or do you try to redirect it and work it for your betterment? It's gonna be there, and if it's not in our town, it's gonna be right up against the border. Which means, how much are you really protecting your own interests just by saying it's 10 miles further down the road? It's gonna be there. It's gonna have the same potential as if it's in your backyard. We don't live where people can be 20 miles away and not affect you. So I think we just need to make smart bylaws and regulations, plan for it. I think I agree with the general overlay districts so that you can work where it best fits in the town. I think you need to review how recreational is broken down separately than medical. You literally have 3 types of business. You need to break your laws down to understand that each type has its different restrictions, and you may need additional laws that say when you combine permits into a certain site, it requires this or that. So I'm just saying it's complex. We need to take as much advice as we can. I do understand a concern of, okay, this guy's representing business entities that want it. So he may give good advice in some places, then he may hold back because he's looking for the best advantage of those he represents.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not necessarily saying you represent monetarily or not. Honestly, it doesn't matter. What I'm saying is if you hear good advice, take it no matter what the source, but be very careful that there's also something that might not be said. And try to find someone else to fill in the blank. So that's pretty much the advice I would have here is be willing to see if he has something to help you with, to at least understand the structure of the laws that are being debated and kind of almost approved at this moment up on Beacon Hill.
Approved. So the first draft comes out on Thursday. The second draft comes out on the 29th. And then those will be sent out for public comment January, February, with a brief rewriting period at the end of February. So yeah, the recommendations have come down, and now it's just a question of translating those into regulation.
Yeah, they said that, I think it was in the newspaper, they were gonna be done with this by July 1st.
That's how they set up this whole system, is essentially from that first meeting back in September, they took July 1st and started looking at the various comment periods and the various advertising periods and set their deadlines based back off that. And yeah, they've been doing yeoman's work down there. It has been, the transparency of this process has been absolutely fantastic. Every single meeting has been a public meeting, has been a televised and live streamed meeting. It's been 100% open debate. There was a 30-member cannabis advisory board made up of every kind of stakeholder you can imagine, everything from Mass Municipal Association to Harvard psychologists studying the effect on youth, industry, packaging experts, the woman who designed that little cartridge that all those Gillette razors come in that you click it in and out of. She was their packaging consultant. So this has been a very, very well researched and very, very openly debated and lengthily debated subject. So really all that's happening now, the rulemaking has been done, now it's in the rollout phase. And the wave is building, and I think it's smart to be on the crest of that wave instead of waiting for it to hit you, just as you were saying.
Why don't we do this, we agenda this for the next meeting as well, and I gotta digest this whole thing myself, but,
I just have one more question.
Yep.
That, not so much about zoning and all that is, but based on your understanding of state regulations that are going on, are they also regulating within the state logistics regulations? So like who gets to transport, how it gets transported?
So
is that
absolutely.
a special license also?
That is. So I didn't want to cut you off when you were saying that there's 3 licenses. There's now about 15 types of licensure.
Okay.
So transportation is one of the licenses. So they're essentially saying we need to control every part of the supply chain and set up a full chain of custody over this product from seed to sale. And anyone who comes into direct contact with the marijuana is going to need to be licensed. And anyone who provides an ancillary marijuana service, such as the advocacy groups, will be able to register with the Department of Public Health, have their background and have their oversight looked at, and essentially get a sort of a Better Business Bureau rating. And be said, this is a firm that we think is doing good work, or this is a firm that we're not going to give our recommendation to, and sort of have a full picture oversight. For the ancillary ones, it'll be sort of a Better Business Bureau rating. If you actually have direct contact with cannabis, then you'll have to get a license. So transportation will be one license. There's a delivery license that they're contemplating. There's multiple forms of retail. There's the outdoor license. There's an entirely new system that they're calling the micro business license, which is sort of a under 5,000 square feet, not invested with any other cannabis companies, and operating within the local community, and you get a reduced licensure fee and a little bit of technical assistance to help you get that set up. Some sort of mentoring with job development programs and things along those lines. So the floodgates have really been opened from that. The only thing that exists is that RMD vertical integration model to essentially, if you can conceive of it existing as a non-cannabis business, it will exist as a cannabis business and be under one of these forms of licensure. Everything down to what they're calling the social use licenses, which will be the coffee shops like they have over in Amsterdam. They're still trying to figure out exactly how those are gonna work, but it'll be everything from a full-on cannabis bar all the way down to a yoga studio that might wanna offer an edible as part of a guided meditation, or a massage studio that might wanna give a massage with a cannabis-based oil, and sort of everything that falls within that spectrum. So there's a huge, huge amount of possibility out there. There's a lot that needs to be addressed. It's a huge lift for any planning department, especially as we're heading into this town meeting season. And all we're looking to do is say, and just like you said, I hope I'm not your only source of information. I hope you go to Jeff Bagg over at CMRPC and, you know, fact check what we're saying against with him. And I hope that you get in contact with the Cannabis Commission and ask for their viewpoint on things. But what we want to offer is saying, you know, we're working towards the same goal. We both want to encourage responsible business development. We both want to encourage the betterment of public safety. We both want to encourage local farmers to be able to keep farming in the local community. And how, as I have been saying all night, how can we meet in the middle on this? And I don't expect you to take everything I say. And I know that I'm not going to be happy with everything you say, but a compromise works best when both parties can, come towards a responsible solution, and that's exactly what we're looking for.
Yep. Sam, then,
In your experiences, have there ever been any town-owned facilities?
So that's a pretty interesting concept, and that's actually something that's starting to come a little bit into the conversation. Not so much in the sense of the town operating the facility, but there are some towns, and I don't want to, throw a name out there, but there is a town very close to Barry that is interested in leasing town land for one of these concerns. And they have some surplus town land that they think would be a good fit for one of these sites, and they would be interested in being the landlord. Not only would that be an additional income stream, that's also another layer of oversight as well. So there's no municipally operated ones or anything like that. There's none that currently operate on municipal land, but that interest is definitely starting to peak.
And for that direction, that 3%, the town would be paying its own 3%, and they'd be guaranteed an income such as a landfill.
Exactly. So
An annual
there's
landfill.
the income stream from whatever rental payments are negotiated, and that would be a business decision. And then on top of that, there would be the 3% of gross sales. But that's very, very far on down the pipeline. Before we figure out where these are going to be, we have to figure out how they're going to be.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
okay, Dennis?
I'm the chairman of the planning board in town. I'm also on the conservation committee. We've worked with, and I don't want this to sound like I'm tooting our own horn, I'm not. I'm just giving you some information out here. For many, many, many months, we've been working with CMRPC, Mr. Bagg, Janet Pierce, and a whole array of other towns and municipalities that are also seeking help through CMRPC, which has been very knowledgeable. We are looking at drafting regulations for a bylaw to go before the town to vote on. Currently, we have 2 public meetings in the town hall. I'm not sure the dates on the top of my head, but for public forums to discuss all of this stuff. So we get an input from that. I'm going to recommend that Mary Ann notify the members of the Aggie Board to participate in that, and the Board of Health and anybody else that wants to get involved with it, because the more the better. We've been on our own time traveling all around the state, going to different towns for these CMRPC meetings with a whole lot of other towns to discuss these same things. So we're working very diligently on it, and I commend some of the other members on the board for taking their time uncompensated to do all these things. I know that sounds like a little self-serving, but it's not. It's just
It helps
very
though,
involved.
because like I haven't been tracking what you guys have been doing. I've got other things that I've been paying attention to, so it gives me more input to understand a little of the effort you've been putting in. Don't get me wrong, I did not assume you're doing nothing. I haven't been really on top of it, all you've been doing.
And I just want to say, I hope you don't think I was saying that either. I hope you don't think I'm saying it hasn't been addressed,
No,
just
I'm
offering a
not-
supplement.
Not implying that at all. I'm glad Phil mentioned about having somebody from the Aggie on the board. That's a good idea. Because who knows more about agriculture than the farm?
Okay, I think what we want to do, to allow Greg to have some input, and why don't we agenda this for our next meeting, talk about it, revisit the issue again, and how we want to go about approaching it. I think we have a lot to give some thought to. One thing I like about the Massachusetts law is I think the tax is much more realistic than some of the other states, and particularly Colorado, and I guess Oregon's got they've still got problems with organized crime involved and everything in Colorado. 'Cause
Absolutely.
the tax is just 38% or some crazy thing, and
Yeah, if the tax is that high and you make it too hard of a system to get into, then that illicit market remains an attractive option.
right,
So,
an extra 38% on the margin is a pretty good amount to play with illegally. So I think the Massachusetts law is much more realistic, and in terms of the tax and so on. So you give me something to think about. I suspect that, just so people don't think, we've got, I think, 10,000 acres or something in Barry under 61A. I read it one time. And I guess with the land clearing and stuff that's going on, it's probably still up in that range. I don't think people are going to drive through Barry and see this like one big marijuana field. I think that, first of all, I got a feeling this is kind of like tobacco. It's extremely labor intensive. So you're going to see you'll see small pieces, I would guess.
the standard model, it's not allowed to be visible in any way from a public way.
Right.
So a lot of screen trees are typically planted. And then the other side of the coin is just from a practicality standpoint.
Right.
It's very hard to meet the short growing season and the intense purity considerations growing outside. It's even hard to do in a hoop house. So these are typically done either in a combination of starting indoors, go into a hoop house, finish indoors,
Yeah.
or wholly in a greenhouse.
Yeah. Yeah, I figured it just, in the type of soil it's going to take, you start to get limited as to the acreage you're going to have quickly in New England, and the growing season is going to hurt.
Now,
Our yield potential is a lot lower, I would guess, just like corn and everything else.
Very much so, and that comes into a lot of how agriculture will have a large part to play in this, because the different marijuana strains, some are ready for harvest in as short as 6 weeks, and some take 18 weeks. So there's going to be a lot of local research and a lot of local trial and error. Bless you.
Thank you.
To sort of figure out what works best and what fits. Really, the way I was at Northeast Organic Farmers Association last week. They're talking about this completely in wine terms. They're talking about how the terroir of the different farms will really affect the different strains that can be grown there, and really trying to look at this in that vineyard model, which I think makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of sort of carryover you can do between the two. So it's going to be very interesting to see how a lot of all of that starts to play out. But that's been the state's concern from day one, and that's absolutely why I think there needs to be a strong hand from zoning. I mean, I've driven through Barry plenty of times. I was coming up here in the summer all the time to the ice cream shop on the Commons, and the last thing I would want to see, even being in this industry, is a cannabis field across the street. I mean, just from my own standpoint, that continues stigmatizing the industry when you detract from its integration into the community. So there's ways to make sure that this is set up in a fashion that keeps the town the reason that it's been an attractive town and offers this as a supplement, but doesn't do it in such a fashion that it's kicked out to the outskirts of town and made unattractive to the people who want to do it. Finding that happy equilibrium.
Matt?
My last comment would be to ask you or Faye to confirm the public meeting dates the planning board set up, and just repost that on Facebook. Just kind of do it a couple times to get the word out. We're gonna have, the more we get that out there, the more people have the opportunity to come and actually speak their voice before we get down to, it's kind of too late to bring it up now.
Okay, very good. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, I really appreciate it.
Yep, I gotta,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
I gotta take a quick break. I'll be right
Absolutely.
Good luck.
You got it.
I'll go on.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'll shoot you an email tomorrow.
Thanks. That's
No deal. Oh, which one? What's the excavator warming his feet? Lucky it's, just that.
Yeah, find out Wednesday,
Is it his heel?
part of it.
Yeah,
How that
good.
goes.
And I know what that's all about.
Yeah.
Ed must have been sick.
Mhm. Yeah. Like, it comes in threes, right?
Right. Shouldn't be needed on the alcohol thing, that's all good, right?
Yeah, yep.
Okay, I think we're good.
Have fun. Thank you much.
okay. We've got our license renewals to
Somebody
deal.
wants to watch us just do standard, boring wage authorizations and stuff.
I really like it.
We do it with such suave.
Suave Bola.
Okay, we have a list of liquor license renewals to deal with. Now, I think we can just approve the entire list,
Yeah,
right?
I think, he's got the.
Yeah, I provided the list to you guys. These are the liquor licenses for the 2018 season. We have, every license is renewing. Every license has been checked with the tax collector. There's nothing, a couple had, I want to call it an outstanding tax, but it's not really, it was just due in November. So there's nothing over lots of time, so to speak.
Do I count 18 licenses?
Correct. And I have one to add on there, which I finished after I compiled this list for you guys. It was a motor vehicle class 2 license for Motor Specialties Incorporated.
Where's that?
They have a location of 26 Valley Road. I guess it's an antique, from what I've been told, an antique car collector that uses a class 2 license.
Is that a renewal or a new request?
Renewal.
Okay.
And don't we have to do common victualers and all those?
Yep, those will be coming at your next regular meeting.
Okay.
We're using that new software, kind of ran into a couple of hiccups with this. Even today, the licenses that I renewed all came up with a December 31st, 2017 expiration, because the system, I guess we didn't set it up to recognize like new, you know.
Right.
Yeah, so we had to reprint these. So I apologize to any of the businesses that may have gotten 500 emails from me over the course of the last couple of weeks. I didn't expect that all emails were being sent to the businesses, but apparently they were.
And make a motion to approve the liquor license renewals for in-holder restaurant club license, farmers brewer pouring, and off-premises liquor license renewals.
Okay, and second that. Discussion. Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. In favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Just one more thing if I can add to that.
We gotta do the other one separately though.
Yes, and I have one more thing. So as you remember last year, this is all done electronically with ABCC, so I don't know if you guys wanna make a motion to authorize me to hit submit, for authorization on that website.
There's no local authority signature thing?
Not anymore.
Yeah, you type in the names of the individuals that are on the board, but the administrator of the account hits the submit button.
Right.
Pretty much.
So I
There's
just
no-
need you to
there's
make a
no-
motion to
Of course
authorize
that's how
me
they
to.
do it. They write a law and then they're like, but we'll make it hard for you to use the law. I would make a motion that Faye is authorized upon approval in the meeting to hit submit in the software program to finalize the application process.
I will second that. During further discussion, hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
She'll go to jail for us if it's wrong.
Yes, because we'll say, that didn't happen in the meeting.
Yeah, we'll say it happened.
Funny, the video
We'll
disappears.
say it happened, but we gave
I'll
her,
remind everybody to check the
we
YouTube.
gave you the authority to do it. So, okay.
All right, then I now make a motion to accept the motor vehicle class 2
I will
business
second.
renewal certificate.
All the specialties,
Yes.
I will second that. Discussion, hearing none, I'll call for a vote. In favor?
Aye.
The only other thing you guys have to do with the liquor license is the 2018 seasonal population increase estimate. Every year we have to provide ABCC with an estimate of what our population will be.
Where'd
So I
that number
did-
come from?
Ellen Levin, town clerk.
Ellen estimated.
Yeah,
50,
pretty much.
is that based on the current population or actually thinking we're gonna grow?
I think it's current plus the estimated.
Yeah, basically, it's what gives us our quota for the amount that we can offer, because they base the number of licenses that are given to the town off the quota. But I believe it's probably based off of what the last census or local census was, right? Or-
That's what she gave me.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Best possible guess
Gotcha.
from the town clerk.
Right. I make a motion to sign the 2018 seasonal population increase estimation form indicating as of July 10th, 2018, Barry will be at an estimated population of 5,050 people.
I will second that. Discussion, hearing none, I'll call for a vote. In favor?
Aye.
Yeah, primarily the seasonal population increase, it's really based for, the towns on the Cape that go from 2,000 residents to 20,000 residents in July, so. Less for us, and more just a matter of process.
We get 20 more people in
Yeah.
the summer. They all come back from Florida or something.
Florida does the same thing, but it uses December's numbers.
They rotated it around.
Okay, we have two resignations, one from Tom Mertzick from Council on Aging in our packet of information, and the other from Kyla Casiello, from the Youth Commission. Was pleasures of the board, wishes of the board.
I did not have the privilege to get to know Tom Mertzick very well, but I would like to at least express my appreciation for his contributions to the Barry Council on Aging. And similarly, I'd like to say the same for Kayla Casiello. As you can see how I tried to pronounce her last name. I also did not get a lot of chance to spend time with her. But I know that she got on the committee since I've been here and took on the chairmanship at least at that point, and I appreciate what she did to help play that role and get that youth commission moving forward again. So thank you both.
Okay.
I would
Do we have to have a vote on that?
You can.
make a motion to accept the resignation of Tom Mertzik from the Berry Council on Aging and Kayla Casiello from the Youth Commission.
And I will second that. Further discussion, hearing none, I'll call for a vote in favor.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we have an appointment for Ashley Toscano to the Youth Commission. To just
Has the Youth Commission made any comment about supporting this?
Not heard anything back. I believe she was in on Thursday.
Yeah, I think they recommended she come in and do the application from what she told me, so I'm assuming they support that.
Okay. I make a motion to appoint Ashley Toscano to the Youth Commission, pending no negative feedback from the Youth Commission after said vote.
Okay, I'll second that. Further discussion? None, I'll call for a vote in favor.
Aye.
Now, we have an alternate on the Council on Aging, right?
We do, yeah.
That's Stanley McNitus?
It is correct.
Do we wish to move him on to the, I assume probably should check, and make sure he still wants to.
Yeah, we should
So
probably
there's
wait till
more
we
than
get-
one alternate though.
I'm sorry?
I thought there was more than one alternate on that
Well,
because we didn't
I'll
really
wait till-
vote alternates in, so I think they had their own alternates
Right.
they appointed.
Correct.
We'll
Yeah,
we'll
we
wait
can-
till we get guidance from them as far as who they
Okay.
recommend
Yep.
for appointment.
Okay. We have a request to use town property by the Maplewood Arts Group from Spencer Road, Ocam. And we've had this group before, I think.
We do a lot. Yep.
3 nights from now? Wednesday night?
Yes. What's the date?
December 20th, if I'm reading it right? Or it's December RO?
I think
2
it's
days.
this week, yeah.
Wednesday.
Yeah, the 20th.
Yeah. What ground they give in handwriting, they make up for in the arts.
Yes, yes.
Okay?
Is this a profit or not-for-profit?
Non-profit.
Non-profit.
I would make a motion to accept the use of town property, specifically Town Hall, December 20th, for the Maple Wind Arts Group.
Okay, and I will second that. Any discussion? Hearing none. Call for a vote in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we have a National Grid's annual rights-of-way management plan. This is more of just a notification. We don't take any action on this whatsoever.
No, he posted on the town's Facebook page as well. So.
Okay.
It does though, however, request input from the general public to confirm the information that they present. More specifically, they state, whether it was in the cover letter, I forget, or in the wording here, that they recognize they don't know everybody's use of their own land. So when they present their vegetative management plan, that includes use of pesticides, et cetera. They are trying to work around individual organic farms and things like that they know of. So if you have an organic farm and there's potential, there's any National Grid distribution around you, I would suggest reviewing this and then finding out if you think you need to notify them that you have an organic farm and you're looking for a more restrictive use of pesticides around your property. So again, Town Administrator's Office, Faye, I know helped post this same pamphlet that was sent to us on Facebook. It's there. You can also come to the office if you need a copy, obviously, and it'll help you find out how to communicate your concerns and potentially at least let them know what you do on your property. I don't know what rights you have. I just know that it does speak to, this is an intent to let you voice your position. So we won't do it. Don't ask us to represent your concerns to them. That's not what this is about. This is about letting you know to go talk to National Grid about your concerns.
It's actually a very large area. When you consider the power lines and how they run diagonally right through town. So, did you have anything you wish to report? Sam?
I have a question, I guess just a procedural question. You all mentioned about the information on Facebook. Is it also on the town website or a web, I guess they call it the website?
As of Thursday,
So all
everything
of
that
this-
gets posted
So all of this information is posted in Word form or just in video form?
everything that gets posted to the town's social media page is concurrently posted onto the town's website as well.
Oh, wonderful.
Yep.
So
'Cause I'm not old enough to have
Yeah.
Facebook yet.
It's
That's okay, neither am I.
You should be able to print it from there, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our Facebook page is a public page, so everything posted on there is accessible whether you're on Facebook or not.
Right, the website is, as Andrew just said, it's up and running since last week, and therefore it is a much improved, reliable resource for information. And go take a look. You'll like it.
I saw it, I thought it was nice. By the way, just as a joke, as a point of information, my son asked me if I was in LinkedIn, so he could talk to me, whatever LinkedIn is. And I told him via email that I was on Linked Out. So I'm glad it's on our website, you can read it. Thanks.
Okay, do you have anything you wish to, under selectmen's reports? Or?
I have one thing I'd like to,
Okay.
it's more of an initiative to kind of raise an issue I've talked about before, but I think need to raise it up a little bit more. Part of it is a little request of information from the town administrator's office. To start planning for the distribution of our cable access throughout the town. Our current agreement with Charter limits what roadways require them to extend their service into based on population or density along the road. I would like to know when our current agreement ends. When I'm reviewing it, I understand that you may want to start negotiations with them up to 1.5 years before your current agreement ends. That's how I've read it through state.
I think we just entered
Advice?
into a 10-year contract, I wanna say 2013, 14, somewhere in
Okay.
there.
And if that's the case, then I still want to figure out the right means to speak to them about other opportunities, because this is extremely important to certain parts of our town, and we really don't have another means to fix it, so we've got to find out and approach them and figure out how can we get this to these homes. And secondly, we need to explore funding mechanisms or even potentially betterment taxes to help these homes get it, but then extend that over so many years so that the cost isn't something they're paying up front, where they can absorb it more easily over time. I think we really gotta, we can't wait 10 years to figure this out, because by then, cable's gonna be outdated. And we're still gonna be 10 years behind the highest speed systems going on, and which just puts our educational opportunities in this area backwards, behind this. Not to mention the potential impacts of net neutrality and all of that just occurred. When you've got a slow network, and then they decide that they can slow you down more, you might as well just pull out the abacus and get back to figuring out math without a computer, because you're just gonna watch your computer spinning. So we gotta do everything we can to make that a priority, and it's something that's really, really important to me. So I'd really like to see what we can do to make this a higher level thing for the town to look at. I think it's more important than, let me rephrase that, it's an undervalued benefit to the town based on how we look at our infrastructure. For the longest time, it was never considered part of your infrastructure because it was a privilege. But the way we live today, internet access really isn't a privilege anymore for children or young adults or even professionals and college students that stay in Barrie. They won't want to stay if they don't have it. So we'll have no retention of our population if we don't fix this soon. So to me, I just wanted to bring it up as a report to initiate and really speak my voice and see if we can get this moving forward. And so the request was just simply get a copy of the contract so I can read it, figure out when the termination date is.
Don't some people have this access via the telephone lines or via the satellite, or is?
Neither of them are as reliable as your cable connection.
Oh, really? Okay.
Both are, well, in my understanding, our phone lines are very slow. They're an ancient system because we don't have Fios or fiber optics running on the phone line in our town. And when it comes to satellite, it's too dependent on the weather. You get clouds, you get bad weather, you get wind, throws the satellite off, it stops talking, and you lose everything.
Snow on it.
So satellite is what you go to when you really aren't connected to you can kind of live on your own, on your little well and your little solar, and not be connected to society. Or you're stuck in Barrie and you don't have cable to your house, so you're living on a satellite because it's your only option.
Is there no way to ask the telephone company to bring in fiber optics?
We can ask.
And then we at least
I'm
have
just,
two companies to fighting for us. Right now, if it's only cable, then they make all the rules.
I think it's a good option to look at. You're right. This was just to get the ball rolling on. We got to find an answer, and I believe currently cable is the most reliable in this town for that. It may not be the only option though, so I agree. We should continue to pursue and look and see what other companies are willing to invest in and maybe help us get to where we want to be. So I agree. Don't get too isolated on one thing.
Okay. I don't have anything extra to report tonight.
Let's see, your town website's up.
Good job, Andrew. Thank you much.
Thank you.
A lot of work went into that.
Thank you.
Looks really good.
Appreciate it.
Looks good.
Yeah, a lot of weekends, a lot of lost time put into it, but glad we finally got it done with. We got training officially scheduled for tomorrow with the department heads. I have all the user accounts set up for everybody. I just have to distribute usernames and passwords to everybody so that way they can get in on the back end and start playing with their stuff. Moving along with that. 9/11 Monument Committee. Got it down to the wire. I know they kind of brought the stuff to me Thursday at 4 o'clock, but I still got everything together for them and got it submitted in time for the draft deadline.
Thanks for your help on that, because I know it was squeezing something into an already busy schedule.
Yeah, did a lot from home. So, Public safety building, I know that we had that estimated turn-on date of December 15th. I followed back up with Charter to figure out what's going on with this, because they seem to be ahead schedule initially with their fiber installation. After I had completed this and sent it out, I got confirmation back from them that they're looking to schedule the on-site installation on Friday of this week. So hopefully that moves along as planned and everything else falls in right behind it. And finance, we're officially done with the balance sheet, and the schedule is on track to be done this week. Submitted to the state 6 months earlier than last year.
Step in the right direction. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
To both treasurer and accountant's offices as well.
Okay, Faye, did you have anything? You got anything else?
That's it.
Faye, did you have anything you wanted to?
Nope.
Okay. With that, I guess we've come to the end. Take this opportunity to wish everybody a happy Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah. It was related to holidays. We take this time to enjoy yourselves. So with that, Happy New Year. Come to the end.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Thank you. Second. Favor?
All right. Thanks so much, all.